Well, our big focus, Iran is seemingly downplaying Israel's long-anticipated retaliatory strikes, as many have pointed out. Described by the Israel Defense Forces as precise strikes, Tehran has so far avoided pledging a definitive response to Saturday's attack, as the country's regime faces both a challenging economy and a fight over its future leadership, as per analysts. Israel's strike, though, killed 4 soldiers and seems to have targeted military sites. As far as the reaction from the United States is concerned, Joe Biden has said he hoped this marked the end in escalatory actions between Israel and Iran, as the White House seeks to revert the conflict to a shadow war and not an overt war, as per some Middle East and US analysts. We have reactions lined up for you. Listen in.
قدرت و توانایی و ابتکار و اراده ملت ایران رو هنوز درست نتوانستن بفهمن. این رو ما باید به اینها بفهمونیم. کیفیت کار رو مسئولین ما باید تشخیص بدن و درست بفهمن و اون چی که صلاح این کشور و این ملت هست اون رو انجام بدن.
מי שפוגע בנו, אנחנו פוגעים בו. זהו העיקרון שהנחה אותנו עד היום, וזה העיקרון שינחה אותנו גם בהמשך הדרך. התקיפה באיראן הייתה מדויקת ועוצמתית, והשיגה את כל מטרותיה.
Well, Iran's leadership has said it is weighing a response to this weekend's Israeli airstrikes, as the country has called on the UN Security Council to meet today. Joining us for further clarity, Dr Reza Kanzadeh, Middle East expert and Iran analyst. Also on the broadcast with us, geopolitical analyst Irina Tsukerman. Thank you so much for making time for us on NDTV. Dr Reza, to you first. Now, some reports citing sources have highlighted that Israel's retaliatory strike against Iran took out a critical component in Iran's ballistic missile program. In fact, the mixers, they're highly sophisticated equipment that Iran cannot produce on its own, is what we're hearing, and they need to purchase it from China. Dr. Reza, has this been a huge blow for Iran?
Thanks for having me. To phrase it as a huge blow, I think that remains to be seen, but as far as the data that we have seen thus far, especially from the types of open source analysis that is currently going on and ongoing, it does seem to be a significant blow to the regime. We have to keep in mind that, like you said, Iran is very limited in the number of ballistic missiles and most military types of equipment that they have, with all the sanctions that are imposed on them, and also their main backer militarily being Russia, also in a war with Ukraine. They have very limited access to the amount of ballistic missiles that they typically would have. So with these strikes by Israel, it does set them back for a number of years, I believe, for them to kind of regain and get back to where they are now. At the best, I think they have about over 3,000 short-term ballistic missiles that can't reach Israel. So yeah, this would be a significant blow. Now, as far as a huge blow, we would have to wait and see, because a long-term strategy, I think, for Iran would be not so much attacks from Iran, but kind of re-strengthening and regrowing Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, and using their proxies more, moving forward.
Irina, meanwhile, do you agree with the assessment that Iran has to weigh the likely diplomatic damage to its improving relations with its Arab partners of mounting a further attack? Then there's the impact on its ailing economy, and the likelihood that a further Israeli strike would actually cause considerably more damage than Friday's softening up exercise. Irina, I think you're on mute at the moment.
I think that's partially correct. I think Iran certainly has to be careful in any future direct strikes. But however, I don't believe that this particular strike will completely eradicate its capacity. Moreover, Iran in the past has shown willingness to rely more on its other partners when it faced a critical shortage of components or weapons. It could purchase more of the fuel from China, or it could purchase more missiles it could reduce the number of missiles that it sends to Russia. It could also rely more on North Korea, another potential partner in this in the axis that Iran has formed with China and Russia as well. In terms of diplomatic relations, any signal of weakness on Iran's part will be a far more powerful blow to these relations than any moral or ethical considerations on its part. And right now, Iran is signaling weakness. Hezbollah has been militarily weakened. It is true that there is a growing extremism, and some of these operations have also been used as a recruitment tool for ideological warfare, but ideological warfare is a long-term project. In the short term, Iran is weakened, although it's not weakened as much as it could be. It's not completely debilitated. All of these strikes have been warning strikes to avoid escalation. They've been deterrence value. They have not been of such values that they could degrade Iranian capabilities completely or destroy some of its long-range missiles and drones that it has in its capacity. Moreover, the Houthis, while Hezbollah and Hamas have been damaged, Houthis have actually grown in strength and sophistication over time. They're still not where Hezbollah is, but they are growing, and it is possible that Iran will be investing more in them, especially if Russia is also involved.
Well, it has then definitely dealt a significant blow to Iran, as you've both highlighted. But Dr. Reza, if we go by the latest polling that's been conducted by the Middle East Institute, that clearly shows that public support for Iran's costly foreign policy is now fragile.
Yeah, absolutely. The Islamic Republic is being stretched thin to a point where their own survival now could be at risk. There's even very faint whispers and rumors that Supreme Leader of Iran, Khamenei, is terminally ill, and he may have maybe a year, maybe less, depending on the types of medical treatment that he gets.
Right.
So if we take that into consideration, also the continued domestic problems that plague the regime with almost monthly protests in opposition to the regime, and also with these strikes by Israel, going back to what we were saying earlier, this really puts Iran essentially in a box, if you will, where on the one hand they have to show strength or else they'll seem weak, but in order to show strength, it'll make them weaker because they have a finite number of, missiles, ballistic missiles, what have you, and they're playing essentially a war of attrition with it, against Israel, to where Israel is backed by the United States, where there's essentially unlimited, military capabilities, and Iran is essentially backed by Russia, perhaps China, but I doubt China will, really step in to kind of pick up the gap where it is from Russia. So essentially, Iran is going to run out essentially of that type of military capability. So they may show strength now in the short term, but this type of regime does not stay in power for almost 50 years without calculating that long-term, strategy. So I think because they're stretched thin at this point, regionally, domestically, internationally, with the sanctions and the loss of so much, military capabilities, I think they're going to be a bit more strategic if they do retaliate against Israel, which I doubt they will. Like I said, I think they're going to start playing a more mid to long term, type of strategy.
Right. Irina, meanwhile, the United States says it's concerned that the cycle of tit-for-tat strikes between the Middle East's largest military powers could lead to a full-scale regional war as we speak. But what role do you think the US is playing in helping simmer tensions in the Middle East at the moment?
Actually, US role has been largely counterproductive because it has constrained at various points in time Israel's deterrence value. It has constrained its own deterrence value. It has limited its response to the Houthis in particular, and has given them a lifeline, not only by taking off the FTO list in the beginning of the Biden administration, but never fully reapplying sanctions and essentially playing financial games with them and making very limited strikes that did not fully degrade their capabilities, failing to disrupt smuggling operations by Iran and now increasingly by Russia, and even China is growing its hand inside Yemen at the moment. Even with Hezbollah, U.S. has played such a cautious game that it's almost like it does not really see the big picture in the region. The fact that Iran's proxies are not just military components of the chaos, but they are also political movements which have used corruption, political ties, and organized crime and assorted other and ideological strategies to root themselves, entrench themselves
Well,
in
many continue to
several
actually
countries.
question the role that the United States is playing on ground zero. But thanks so much, Irina Tsukerman, as always, for joining us, and Dr. Reza Kanzadeh for joining us with your assessment.